We're live.
Good morning, Japan.
uh,
I am here
hello.
with with Trevor West. He's a guy from the U.S. Living living in Japan for the last 8 months, and
Mhm.
more bigger part of his life exploring Japanese culture, language, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Uh, I am also kind of this Eastern culture explorer. I love summarize Zen, and I guess we
Yes.
both listen obviously to Alan Watts and stuff like that.
Yes.
And
Just a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. And recently Trevor wrote a post. I will link it up down the video, and he wrote about, well, not about enlightenment and Zen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe we just start like, why did you? What's your beginning with Japan, and then we go to Buddhism and Zen. So something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Thanks, Marco, for the good intro. So just a very brief intro. I'm Trevor West. I'm currently working and living on Iki Island in Japan. It's like this Japan, you have like the main islands. It's like a banana kind of, and then like all the way down here southwest in Kyushu is where Iki Island is. And I'm working here as the coordinator for international relations, so translation and stuff. So basically, I guess what started me, what initially got my interest in Japan was like the pop culture was it was anime, was specifically Naruto. I remember watching it. What was it? In middle school. I think I started to watch anime and other things in Japanese with English subtitles in high school and beyond. But initially, I watched it English dubbed. So that's how I got an interest in Japanese culture in general, and then it branched from there. I was like, oh, I want to learn the language because there was some video games, some anime. I wanted to visit Japan, so my interest expanded from there. And I guess I don't know if this is gonna be. I'll keep it brief, but religiously, I was raised in a Mormon background. It's a Christian branch, and so I had my experience in that. I was raised in that, but basically I went through like a period of like Mormonism to kind of being angry atheist to being like atheist to being agnostic atheist to being agnostic to not really caring anymore or labeling anymore. And then so in that interest of me kind of learning more about other religions and cultures, in Japanese culture specifically, I ran into Zen Buddhism, just Buddhism in general, Taoism or Taoism, however you want to call it, Hinduism. So in my, I researched a lot of and looked into and read a lot of philosophy, psychology, religion, and so yeah, that's how I got interested in Zen and why I guess I'm in Japan and stuff now.
So and how, now that you mention anime, how does that uh, sort of art reflect from their culture? Is it like, can you read the Eastern culture from it? I think I haven't
Mm.
watched it a lot. I know some, at least not when I was young. Now
Mm-hmm.
I've seen something with my daughter. Some of the,
Okay.
not the short animated, but with the longer ones. It's one was
Okay.
my friend, something with the fat,
Might be.
with ghost.
Oh, My Neighbor Totoro. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
Studio Ghibli. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those are really popular. I really like those. Those
yeah,
are
yeah.
those are good movies.
So and it's and I watch, I don't know, Disney, and then I watch this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's completely different. It's so,
Oh yeah.
these ones are so, I don't know, peaceful. They kind of have
Mm.
like a more natural
Mm.
message or something. It's,
Yeah.
then you see like, okay, this is because lots of people, I think they don't even know they live inside a culture. Would, I don't
Oh,
know
for
if you
sure.
agree.
Yeah.
So this is actually what because I always think about it, but now when you really think, I don't think that people know it. Like for this is like making me who I am, the culture.
Mm.
So how does how did that impact your life? Maybe even while in the
Mm.
US learning, and now when you're living there for 8 months.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think definitely in the U.S., anime and exposure to other, mainly Japanese culture, but other cultures too. You know, foods and practices and these things. Specifically, Japanese culture was a big influence for me because I was really interested in it and consumed a lot of it, learned a lot about it. So getting that gateway into another perspective, and it's like reading books and stuff, and like being able to jump in someone else's shoes and like try and see things from their perspective. And that's where the culture thing comes from, where it's like, for example, just something common like in Japanese culture, blowing your nose in public is like really rude. So people will like they'll like sniff all the time, and probably would drive a lot of Americans really like crazy, like just blow your nose, you know, or whatever. But like it's those little things where you can think that, oh, like these cultural rules and norms and mores that we all just take for granted and say, well, this is right, that's wrong. It's kind of just made up. And when you learn about other cultures, you can come to appreciate this sort of dynamic nature of culture, where it's not like it's not important. It's important. It's what we base our lives on, and it's fun and stuff. But it's also like there's this space that can arise from learning about other cultures. And for me, learning about Japanese culture or Chinese culture or other cultures, there's this greater sense of learning more about American culture, learn more about my own culture, like when I'm here and every day, like when there's a communication error, or like I try to say something and maybe I'm like direct translating it from English to Japanese, and like that's just not how you say it. They're like, wait, what? And then like, oh, you say it this way, and then it's like you realize that like the way communication works, language works in general, is this sort of mutual game of sorts, this mutual dance. So different places have different sensations, different perspectives, and different, could say like rhythms. Because like in Japan, you could say there's definitely less of an emphasis on the individual. It's more like the collective. You even see this reflected in the language, where people usually don't say I, that just gets dropped, and it's usually just the verb. So instead of saying like, hey, let's go eat, it's just like eat, but it's the together sense. It's
Yeah,
masho, let's do it. But there is no let's, or I guess it's let's do it. But let's even is like let us do it,
yeah,
right? So it implies the pronoun, the sense of identity. A lot of cases that's dropped, which ironically leads to confusion even among Japanese people who don't always know what the subject is. So when you need to be clear, sometimes you will specify the subject, because if you don't, then you could be referring to like 30 things. And in a conversation, it could be really clear if you're in the conversation and you're following it. But if you're just hearing from outside, it could be like anyone. I mean, it happens in English too sometimes, but I'd say it's not as common. It's more common to use I, or sort
yeah,
of
yeah.
individual
No, yeah,
focusing.
it's rare, I would say. Yeah, it's
Mm.
interesting. I didn't know that. That's like really influencing you from the beginning in the on the unconscious level.
Mm. Oh yeah. When learning the language, the first, here's like basic Japanese is, so there's like at the end of most polite sentences, there's des, which is like roughly translated in English is it is. So if you're like e des, e is good. So like e des, it is good, good. Uh, but like Yoda speak, it would be like good, it is. And thinking about that way when you're initially learning is really good, because then you're getting that mindset where a lot of way things are phrased in Japanese grammatically is backwards compared to English.
Uh-huh.
And with verbs, you don't say let's, like I am eating a hamburger. It's it could be I hamburger eating. The way that the way the things are structured, like watashi wa hamburger o tabete imasu. It's like I hamburger. Yeah. I don't know how to phrase that grammatically, if it's like subject, object,
Mm,
predicate, or
yeah,
whatever it is,
yeah,
but
yeah, I understand. I thought they say like good at every end of every sentence, or
oh, you mean like they'll say like "いいですね" or "そうですね," like "そうですね." It's like, oh yeah, that's totally right. Yeah, that's it. Like in English, you might be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like how like I say yeah, but like height, height, height. Like yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, then Buddhism.
Oh
And-
yeah, yeah. Buddhism. That. There's like a Shinto shrine poster right there for Kojima shrine, but that's Shintoism. But we don't have to get into
yeah,
that.
yeah. Let's say I see it.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know how. So how does from again? This is culture, so you don't have to enter any, I don't know, spirituality or philosophy. But then you do. Obviously, it's because there it's kind of, well, it's different from ours. So I guess it's more obvious to see it, and it's kind of, I wouldn't know if it's popular or what, but it's kind of, I don't know, everybody knows about kung fu and stuff. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it has like a taste of like you want to know more about it. It sounds like it's something different and it's something good. It was for me. I don't know. It was just attractive.
Yeah.
Did you, so after anime or stuff like that? Did you start? What what was your what's the difference from reading in the US and entering, immersing into the Japanese culture? How did that influence your, I don't know, interests and reading and learning
Okay.
about the whole thing?
Yeah, I would say definitely if you want to learn and kind of expand your horizons and stuff, living in another country is probably one of the best ways to do that. Because I had this, I came to this realization because I did a lot of journaling when I was younger, and I came to this realization that I need to stop writing and reflecting, and I just need to go there. There's only so far you can get with your books.
Yeah, yeah.
And so this is actually a very Zen thing in a lot of ways. Is that it's okay. Stop all this read. Stop it. Just like go do it. Go. And so definitely for me coming to Japan, it's like I just understand on a experience level a lot of the things that before coming to Japan I would read and be like, but why is it like this? What? This is stupid. Why? And then like I came here, I'm like, oh, that's why. But like it's not something you can put in words. Like for example, like Japan religiously, a lot of people have this misconception Japan's very atheistic. In some sense it is because the rubric most Western countries judge a religious country or not is, do you believe in God? Well, that's a very like monotheistic Abrahamic Christian, Abrahamic religion paradigm where there is one God. In Japan, there are gods everywhere. There are gods in the trees. There are gods in the bushes, in the ground, in the ocean, in the fish. Uh, and they have these Shinto shrines everywhere. And then there's also Buddhism. There's this interesting mix. And I would say that most people aren't super devout in, maybe the sense like a Christian would be like, oh, I know God exists sort of thing. Maybe not like that, but it gets to this sort of like there's a vagueness in Japanese where it's interesting. I would say though, like the general religious sensation or phenomena in Japan is more like what do you call it? Ritualistic. So ritual as in,
Drinking
you
tea.
say certain, yeah, like you say certain things in the morning. Like you say certain phrases when you finish work, you say certain phrases. Uh, in emails, you use certain things with certain people and certain social status or whatever. You'll use san, or maybe people who are equal to you, you'll say kun at the end of their name instead of san. With customers and people you're really polite to, sama, like Trevor son, whatever.
Yeah.
If someone's being polite towards me, and people like if I'm talking to someone else, I will lower myself in the language, so I would never say Trevor son. Someone else would call me that, but I would never call myself that because that's elevating myself. So in Japanese, you will lower yourself in the language social status of like language, and you will elevate the person you're talking to. That's pretty much a general rule in every situation. There's probably exceptions, but that that's the religious spirit of Japan is that ritual aspect that is like ingrained in the culture and language. And then Buddhism and Shintoism is like the outlet for more esoteric, mystical, religious experiences. And for the people in Japan who, like people who have an outlet for exploring like a more deeper understanding of religion and spirituality. That's the sense I get. For most people, it's like most Christians aren't super devout and they're like, I'm gonna go be a priest or something. It's kind of
Yeah.
like that maybe. Like most people are like, oh dude, of course there's like spirits and stuff. Like, what are you talking about? But it's not like a big deal, It's not like that's why when like a Westerner comes to Japan and they're interviewing, like, do you believe in God? And they have like their mic and it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like like what? It's like if people came to Japan and it's like, do you believe in gods everywhere in the trees? It's like people would just look at you really weird. Like, so there's this cultural gap where like people are, yeah, in that, like what you're saying before, are so ingrained in their cultural bubble, they don't even realize they're in a bubble. So they can't even like think that, oh, like there's people out there who literally don't even really have a good concept of like this monotheism thing because it's not really a part of their culture and never really historically was.
So they are actually pretty humble,
Yeah,
from a perspective of the whole nation, I think,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah, I would say, yeah, Shinto Buddhism doesn't really preach. It's not really proselytizing. Maybe Buddhism a bit. Shintoism, no. Like, it's the way most people phrase it is Shintoism is for like happy times and celebrations and festivals, and Buddhism is for death. And yeah, that's kind of it. In the practical everyday life, it's
what
like
can you
funerals.
Buddhism is for death.
Yeah, it's like where you go like for funeral rites and burials.
Aha.
That's Buddhism. For celebrations, births, happy times, getting really drunk and wasted, that's Shintoism. It's Shintoism's great. It's kind of like this. You think of animism, right? The old idea that spirits are in everything. You could even say there's spirits in this computer, and there's spirits. There's life in everything, even what we think as inanimate objects. And so, sort of Shintoism is just like kind of an animistic religion. So there's sort of like a respect for nature.
And automatically they are more connected to the nature. That's what I wanted to say, right? Yeah, we are kind of cut off here.
Yeah, Shintoism's it's really fun because it is esoteric and it's not super well defined. There's like the Kojiki and stuff, but yeah, but that'd be another topic, talking about Shintoism or how Shinto Buddhism,
Yeah.
Buddhism specifically in Japan was like, so in China, so like the history of Buddhism, so Buddhism started in India with like Siddhartha, or that one guy, the Buddha. People call
Yeah.
him the Buddha. They have other names for him too, but so that was India. So he kind of started that kind of a branch from Hinduism a bit. So it's similar but different. And basically, for those who don't know the basics of Buddhism, so like there's a few basic principles. Basically, the main one, I think it's the first one. I might get the order wrong, but some English translations say all is suffering or all life is suffering. That's kind of a bad translation in some ways. And the book I've been reading on Zen clarifies this, is all life is dukkha, which dukkha means, it's a better translation of it is disappointment, because dukkha encapsulates both pleasure and pain. So it's not that all life is suffering, because people think suffering and like that's negative, that's pain. But it also includes pleasure. Pleasure is also a part of dukkha because it's also disappointing because it will end. So the attachment is where suffering, all dukkha, disappointment, originates from, and that's the second principle. Is that we are all trapped in, you could call it suffering, as long as it has this nuance that suffering includes pleasure and pain in this greater context of, well, you have a really good time, but that good time is going to end. So if you're gripping onto it and you're like, I don't want this to end, then you're going to feel disappointment. So like the third part of Buddhism is, well, how do you get beyond dukkha, disappointment, suffering? And that's, I think it's like the Eightfold Path. And then basically it goes into the Buddhist idea of, well, different Buddhist branches or sects believe and say different things. certain things say, there's certain things you should read, take on a practice of aestheticism, all this blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And some things are more layman oriented, for everyday people. And that's mainly the sorts of Buddhism that I've been getting into because of, at least for right now, I'm not a Buddhist priest, so
Did
still,
you
like, working in my
did you enter
day-to-day.
any temples or something like that? Did you have any contact with real life monks or something? Did you have any real life teaching from when you're there?
Not so far in Japan. I will say before coming to Japan, I read a lot of this website by this guy called David Chapman. He's a part of the Arrow to Gare. It's a Tibetan Buddhist branch. I think it's the only, legitimate Tibetan Buddhist branch that is based is either America or somewhere in Europe or the West. So it's the only, or at least maybe the only legitimate Western Tibetan Buddhist branch. So it's called the Arrow to Gare Buddhist. He wrote this website. He has a few. The one, it's meaningness.com. That website, he wrote it all in a secular perspective. So he doesn't use any Buddhist religious terminology or spiritual terminology. And I really read a lot of that because he gives a lot of good clarification on basically ways to untangle yourself from ego and attachment, and from, in a lot of ways, an intellectual perspective. So for people who are skeptical or are coming from this Western perspective, I think he's a really good entry point because he is talking the language of the West. I mean, he's a Westerner himself. So you're not entering into it reading this like really esoteric Zen stuff. You're like, what is this? He's taking this, he takes a intellectual approach and sometimes gets esoteric, but always has this sort of intellectual focus or background, which I think is really useful for introducing people to Buddhist ideas and perspectives. And he has another website called approachingarrow.com, I think, and that is that's like the flip side of meaningness, where it's just he's using Buddhist terminology and specific terminology and stuff to get a more specifically Buddhist perspective. But that's probably the only, like, I guess, teacher. So I actually haven't had like a person in Japan. I mean, Jordan Bates, I did one-on-one coaching with him. So I guess if he counts as a teacher. But
no, but I was thinking like a true monk, when it's a good chance to go learn Zen from someone live in Japan.
I don't know if I want to get smacked by a stick. I mean,
maybe, yeah. Maybe you get enlightened. So yeah, two questions now. Do you think it's like common that people Westerners who practice Zen or read or try to practice, I don't know, it's easy for them to slip into nihilism? I have a experience from my own. It's like it's easy to slip. Like if you have a wrong idea to go, it's like maybe from our Western mind, it's similar.
It's interesting. Yeah, because that topic, there's sort of like, for me, there's like the two things. There's like hedonism and then nihilism. Like, so like just the pursuit of pleasure and sort of like the belief or perspective that not like nihilism, nothing matters or whatever. And it's interesting because I feel like the Zen or Buddhist perspective it's kind of like a gateway to embracing kind of like every perspective in a sense. So yeah, there's been times where, like, I'd say after I had like an ego loss moment or something, where yeah, there was a radical release from expectation, and for many weeks or like months I just like did nothing but like hedonism, and then I got bored of that, and then I like had productive energy, and then I started doing stuff. And so, because like when you talk about nihilism, are you talking about like people living it out, like, oh, nothing matters, and then defaulting into like this hedonistic, like kind of like they're not doing anything?
Did you watch Rick and Morty?
Oh yeah.
So it's I love that cartoon.
It's awesome.
And I listened to the creator of the cartoons. It's a couple of minute video, and he says that by nihilism is like nothing matters, nothing really matters,
Mhm.
something like that. But when you realize that nothing matters, at that point everything matters. So it's like
Oh,
you
yeah.
you melt in that nothing matters, everything
Yeah.
matters stuff.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's pretty
actually that's
similar
very
to,
Zen.
yeah,
That's
it's
very
very
Zen,
zen.
yeah.
That's why I
Yeah,
asked,
'cause
because in
yeah.
my experience it is.
Yeah. Because I will say, because there's like two forms of nihilism, if you're going to maybe categorize it. There's the nihilism that is ego centered,
Okay.
and that's like nothing matters. And then you're justifying like doing like, I'm going to eat a lot of unhealthy food. I'm going to play video games and like masturbate
Aha,
3,000 times a
you
day.
slip
Like,
into hedonism.
yeah, hedonism. So that's why I usually talk about them together.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then there's like the Zen and like this other kind of nihilism where it is this, it's like what Nietzsche talked about. It's this, you really, it's the child stage. So if we were going to get into that, but it's the, you release expectation, you let go of the ego. And technically that's nihilistic in some sense, because there's an acceptance that, yeah, nothing really matters in a linguistic game, or at least we can't know or whatever. But in that acceptance or letting go, or nothing, resisting of nothing,
So I
then
would
yeah,
argue
you
that
accept
maybe they're
everything.
not apart. I would argue maybe that this one is a step forward. If you like allow yourself to understand it, like maybe even mathematically or some. If nothing matters,
Mm,
then really everything matters. It's some
mm.
logic or something. It's
Well, it's like it's a paradox though, because you're saying nothing matters and everything matters
yeah,
simultaneously. But that is it. It's
yeah.
because if you're trying to intellectualize it, maybe you could say you let go of the ego trying to grip onto things, trying to say, oh, but I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to buy this, I got to make these people happy, I got to blah 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 blah. You let that go, and then when you let it go, the things that just will flow and will get done will just get done, and the things that don't get done just don't get done. And like there's more power and energy there, because maybe right now, like people listening to this, watching this, are putting energy into things that really don't matter. And if they let go of their ego, the energy they have within them and around them in their environment could just plow through things that maybe not should be done per se, because that gets into like the should and morality and stuff, but could be done. And a lot of people, like myself included, like when I was making like the first two YouTube videos I made, felt very natural, were very fun. And then like two or three videos I made after that were kind of forced, kind of like this, oh, I should be putting out a video every week. And so it's just,
Yeah.
the ideas weren't there, like whatever. It's just garbage, right? And so once you release from that, then it's like, oh, this weekend I literally want to do nothing but just play video games for 48 hours straight. And then I do it, and then the next weekend, oh, I want to do nothing but write articles and do videos for 48 hours straight. It's like, if you're in a position in your life where you can do that, then dude,
Yeah,
like, don't
allowing
beat yourself,
yourself to do it.
don't beat yourself up. Like, that's what I used to do. And then you are less productive, ironically, because you're trying to micromanage, control everything. But when you let go, like right now we're having this conversation, and earlier today, like I did a bike ride, and then like did a bunch of productive stuff that just like really flowed. Like I wasn't forcing it, I wasn't expecting it. It just happened. It's like that's when you get stuff done. That's the power. You're like riding the wave rather than trying to fight against it.
So can you shortly lead us through the three stages you mentioned before?
Oh,
Camel
oh
or
yes. So basically, Friedrich Nietzsche, he was a 19th century, 1900s to, yeah, 1800s, 1900s philosopher, and he has this idea. I'm reading this book now called Zen, Nietzsche and Zen. Was it by this one guy? I have the book under there, but it's covered. But it's like Bond something. Anyways, interesting book. I'm not done with it yet, but basically, there's similarities between Zen and Nietzsche. And one idea Nietzsche had was there's like these three stages that people often go through. There's the I always forgot, camel, lion, and child stage. So the camel stage is like the religious initiate, the person who says, "Oh, there are clearly bad things, good things, or there are clearly good and bad things, clearly good and evil things, righteous things, evil things." You get the idea. And so they think, okay, I have to find out what's true. I have to find truth, moral righteousness, so that I can become good, so that I can, all these things. So they take on these moral burdens of like avoid evil. So some religions or things might say, avoid premarital sex, don't
Like
drink
rules.
alcohol, rules. Yeah. So you take on all these moral burdens, and like it's really hard. It's difficult. I've done it. It's really, really tough. And then at some point, this won't necessarily happen, but the next stage from the camel stage is the lion stage. And so basically in the camel stage, there's what Nietzsche calls the will to knowledge, or no, not will to knowledge, will to truth. This is the I will find truth, and it's the powerful thing of like I will find the truth, and because it's good, it'll all this stuff. But then from camel to lion stage, this will to truth is dropped, and there's this perspective of, oh, like either truth doesn't really exist to begin with, or even if it does, we can't really know it. So there's like that acceptance, and there's a shift from will to truth to will to power. And there's this idea of, well, we can't know if there's truth, but there's certainly, there's power. And then there's this shift to um, doing in the world. There's less of this like moral burdening, and things can happen, I guess, more easily. There's more power behind what you do. And so that's that stage. There's a stage of where there's this greater perspectivism. There's not just a right and a wrong. There's a greater understanding and nuance to the world. And so, but then shift from lion to child, the last stage is this this letting go of the will to power, and the letting go of the ego, and getting this radical transformation of perspective where it's not, for example, the lion might be like, I used to be a camel. I used to want to know truth. There's this emphasis on I. That once you get to the child, there's no I anymore. There's just, you're just looking at the tree, and it's looking at you, and that's all there is. Yeah, if you're gonna say it in words. So that's a child stage, where they're like if you look at a child, they're a baby, dude. They're just running. You think they're like, I am looking at a tree. I am hungry. No, they're just hungry, or they're looking at a tree. Like they're not thinking that. we teach them that. We teach them the language. But like the child, especially the young child, like a baby or like a toddler, they're just like,
Yeah, looking in
you,
awe,
you know what I
everything.
mean? And they're like at
Yeah.
awe at everything. And that's when you're at that stage, like you're just drunk all the time. You're just like, whoa.
Yeah. So this is maybe a good point to go to touch upon this enlightenment. So I was
Mm,
thinking, is it? I always thought like I did. I never, in my pursuit of. No, actually, what got me into all this stuff mostly was the laws of Buddha that says that life is
mm.
suffering or
Oh
whatever,
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
suffering. But
Yeah, those are cool.
so mine was this. My motive for my drive, let's say, for
Mm.
meditating and exploring was that to just relieve the suffering,
Yeah.
to to live a painless life, let's say, a
Mm.
life of ease. But I never really thought like I want to reach enlightenment. And I did
Mm.
well, talk to and read, obviously, and been in communities, at least in internet or whatever, that
Mm.
I saw what you read, what you wrote in the article, that lots of
Mm.
people chase that enlightenment. So
Oh yeah, it's one of
it
the
wasn't
best traps. Yeah.
yeah, but I never had like that. So is it like
Okay.
what was your drive? Did you also like, oh, let's
Oh,
see how we can get to,
oh,
let's see
no,
how we can
no.
reach the enlightenment.
I had a lot of ego constructs, and that's why over the past few months, and this article video was like the whoa, it was like the the manifesto. I don't know. Yeah, a lot of my life I had this idea that I wanted to find truth. Just like there was on one end just a desire. Oh, I want to know truth because it's cool. It's cool to be in the know, to know what things are. But also there's a sense that truth would lead to like betterment. So there's this idea that if we know what's true, we can solve these conflicts. We can improve the world. I can improve myself. So there was that basis. But yeah, similar to what your motive was of like reducing suffering. Yeah, there was also that drive within myself. So yeah, there was, I guess, the desire for enlightenment, because the thought was at the time in my past that if I get enlightenment, well, that's kind of what truth is. So then I'll understand truth once I get enlightenment. So that's why I'm trying to get it. But it's funny. One of the Zen, I think it's Dogen, said that enlightenment is a hitch for donkeys, or is for donkeys and camels. And so it's funny, like with Nietzsche's comments, because it literally is for camels. Like if you're in the camel stage where there is a right and there is a wrong, and you're stuck there. Um,
So
but
is that like a Western made up word, or do they actually, the Zen masters, and do they actually talk about enlightenment, or do just
uh,
because it
there,
seems like it's more
yeah,
like a
maybe
product.
it
It
is
sounds
Western.
like something like we could coin up.
Mm.
It,
Yeah, because I think in Zen they have the idea satori, right? It's the
yeah,
poo. It's the instant. In English, you translate maybe as instant enlightenment or whatever you want to say, but it's it's like the moment of seeing. It's like when I was driving my car. So a few months ago, I was driving my car, and there's like the angry. I'm an angry driver. There's the Sunday driver who's driving 10 kilometers slower than the speed limit in front of me, and I go like 10 over always. So like and then like my ego was just whoo. Yeah. It wasn't there, I guess, for like 5 seconds, and then so it was just like the awareness of the car in front of me, driving, the cars, the sights, the sounds, everything. And but there wasn't a sense of me like, oh, it's my car, I'm driving. So there's this big space. So even like the anger and the sense of self, like, oh, I'm angry that this person's driving slower, I want to drive faster. Those were also just like, like trees you see outside. It's just like there's like a
but
space.
driving is a good example. It's a good place to practice, because you always wanted to reach some place, and someone else is not letting you do it, and there's
Oh
someone else's
yeah,
fault. It's an angry place. It
yeah,
can be.
yeah, very anger thing. But I will say it wasn't like I was like, oh man, I'm gonna meditate. I'm gonna get rid of my anger. I'm gonna become
Uh-huh.
enlightened. It just happened. It was just like bam. It was just like, it's like it wasn't planned. And I think that's what like in the Zen they'd call satori.
Yeah.
It's just like it's like if someone shoots you with a gun or like stabs you, or like the other day a spider dropped on my arm. I'm like, oh, I'm like, oh, it's like those moments where you're really awake.
Yeah.
No denying it, and then it's just like in that moment there can be like a whew, where there's just like a space where like there's no ego, there's just everything all going on. And so in some sense from that, in similar experiences, there was this one Zen master who, this one Zen student was like, oh, master, how do I reach enlightenment? Come on, I've done all these things. I've done everything you've asked. I've fasted. I've given up everything I own. I've meditated for years and years and years. The master was getting really angry with him at this point because he just didn't get it. So he takes his sandal off and just smacks him. He just smacks him right in the face. And then he didn't have to ask any questions anymore because he understood. So that's one example. And then so in Zen, there's like the satori, just the instant, you could say enlightenment, but I don't know if we were talking about how enlightenment is maybe a Western idea or more Western, where it's sort of like if we were to try to define enlightenment, you could say in Buddhism, maybe it's Tibetan Buddhism, there's this concept called Rigpa, Rigpa, which is defined roughly as like the continuing non-dual state of awareness. So this is the, I guess you could say, non-ego state, but also ego state. There's really no distinction. So trying to talk about it gets into weird paradoxes where you say it is the empty state and the full state. It is the emptiest state, the fullest state, because you can't really describe it, because you can't describe everything, because language is inherently separating. So it's just the paradox you get in that. But um, yeah, and then in my own experience, in the past, uh, I maybe got too over intellectual and attached to these concepts where then the goal becomes, oh, I'm trying to obtain Rigpa. I'm going to meditate so that I can get the non dual state, so that I can get rid of ego. But if you think about the catch 22 is if the ego is getting rid of the ego, who's getting rid of the ego? And then it's just turtles all the way down because um, in the end, nothing is going to get rid of the ego because well, it doesn't really exist, and there's nothing to get rid of. I mean, it does exist, and but it doesn't.
You get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I had like in the last couple of weeks, I had two similar experiences. Like you could describe them as Satori. I was and it was interesting. You mentioned about the camel phase and stuff like that because I never. I didn't get into theory much, so I'm not sure where I am, like in perspective, in which path. I don't know, do it. And I was I was like in one period of life, like a month ago or something like that. I don't know, you do it all the time. You try to impose some kind of rules to some kind of habits to lead a good life or better life to whatever. And I was like keeping up with I don't know, taking regular walks, dogs for a walk, eating something, blah blah blah. And then I was like, I realized I was going to a walk with my dogs, and I was like, yeah, this is good. I'm going for a walk and I'm doing it regularly. So this is good for my life. So now this is good. And I was like, and I just, and this is for me is like, I just kind of, I remember like stepping on a stone and just melting in the present moment, like, if I cannot enjoy my every step, what I'm always just doing things because I'm trying to imitate something that I heard that is good for me, and it's not like being present. And at that point, I just like, it's like a puddle of existence, just. I think it's similar, like you said, just being aware of everything and just doing it for the sake of doing it, or not just for that, just being. Yeah. So maybe the main difference between this is going from doing to being. That's also a good description now that I think about it.
Yeah. And if you take like the camel, lion, child, if you wanted to say it in this sense, it's like thinking, doing, being. Those are like the three stages.
Yeah.
So like the camel's the guy who's always trying to like, oh, is that good or is that bad? And then the lion's the guy who's like, and he just does it. And then the child's the one who's like does or thinks or whatever, you know.
Yeah, it's not.
Well, I guess it's beyond it, but it's not because.
No, because I have a daughter that is not yet 5, and I had a similar teaching from her. And at one point, I realized she was like 4, and she was every time I got her from kindergarten. She just says, "Give me a paper." She starts drawing, and she in a couple of weeks she got really good. But but then I understood she didn't do it because she knew she's going to get better. She just did it because she liked to express her feelings in the form of a drawing. And in the meantime, she got better. So then I understood you don't have to plan. You just have to do, and the result will be there by its own. And it's for me, it's all about releasing that control, because we have this. And I recently even watched Charles Eisenstein talk about it. We got this culture of pure control, and we got exponentially just going, thinking that we have can control everything. Just we can go to a state where we really control everything, and then it's going to be good. I think this is like ingrained in our mind that we still don't control everything. We have to do it, and it's this. I don't know. In that way, we are also separated from the nature, and it's opposite from this Eastern culture in every way possible.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, in terms of planning, like plans can arise spontaneously, or like what I do oftentimes, usually more so during the weekdays. Weekends I just kind of let them go, like whoa, they just happen. And then after the day ends I'll type kind of what happened roughly. I'll be like, yeah, I did this. But during the weekdays I'll have a maybe more structured approach, partially just because I work and I have certain hours I work, so it's just there's a more structured like layout for my weekdays. uh, but for in general, whether it's at work or in my personal life after work or before work, plans can change. And if something's like, oh, I feel like this productive energy for this, and I know I can do a lot of work here, then even if I planned yesterday to do one thing, I might not do it at all that day and do it tomorrow or whenever there's a time. Of course, if there's like a deadline, then yeah, you got to like you feel it out. But for a lot of the things, at least that I'm doing, there's not a strict deadline, or the deadline is so far out that it's like there's this ability to maximize what am I feeling, what is the most energy right now. So I feel like a lot of people neglect and they beat themselves up and destroy themselves. And I did it a lot. And it's just really counterproductive because you'll people will beat themselves up, or I would beat myself up for not doing things. They're like, oh, I'm not making a new article every week or even every month. I mean, the most recent Life Further post was like the first post since late January. So what, it's been like 3 months. And I've written actually a lot of drafts, but there was just no energy or motive, or it didn't seem right to post the drafts I posted, or like there's sort of like just this letting go where it's almost like, I guess, like falling in love or something. It's like when like you'll just kind of know, and then you just kind of do it, and it's not this cerebral
Yeah,
level,
but
you know.
it's like that. You are afraid of letting it go because you think you have to
Mm.
push it for it to happen.
Yeah, in order to happen. But that's the funny thing, is when you start to let go, you start to realize the things you think should happen are just predicated in maybe different fear or anger ego holds. And so when you start to let go, the things that were just predicated in fear just kind of maybe start to go away a bit too. So then the things you're doing get more aligned anyways, and then you become more effective, because then what you're doing is what you like doing, is what you're good at doing, and then you just do it.
Yeah, it's like well, I got this from many angles, but in my experience is that the stuff that are, as you said, aligned with you, and the stuff that you really want to do, it's they're kind of quiet if you're loud,
Mm.
and they don't want to like scream, hey, I'm here, I'm here. You just see them among everything else, and it's all just
Yeah.
clatter. Then when you do get quiet and we just observe, it's like the important things start to pop up,
Yeah,
and
yeah, they pop out.
it's, yeah,
There's no
and it's
question.
like
Yeah.
you and then you start to, I don't know, start to get comfortable with that intuition part of you that is like
Mm.
I don't know, listening to your uh, inner being saying like this is good for you, and then just you go for it. But my let's say
Mm.
I saw your article, and because
Mm.
I published this first podcast, and I was thinking when I'm
Mm.
going to do the second one, and then it's easy to slip into this obsessive thinking
Oh yeah,
and
for sure. Oh, I
planning.
should do this
Yeah,
and that routine. Got it. Oh.
yeah. And then I just saw your article, and then I saw, oh, I like this theme. I have. Then it
Mm.
comes easy. I
Yeah,
do not have to
it's just
think what
boom.
will we talk
Yeah,
about for an
it
hour.
just it just
Yeah,
pops up. It's just there. It's
yeah.
there.
Whoa, I can talk 3 hours about this. So, and then
Yeah.
you just do it, and it then and even yesterday I woke up
Mhm.
anxious because we didn't have work, and we didn't have
What
work.
am
So
I
I
gonna
was
do?
how
Ah!
I'm going to do, and started, and you don't even realize. Like I was thinking, what are we going to talk about? What
Yeah.
how it will go? Lots of
Mhm.
expectations and stuff like that.
Mm.
I was like, "Well, we're talking about Zen," and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And
Oh no,
I don't
not
know
then,
anything
not
about it.
again.
uh, yeah. And so actually, I had a second moment that day yesterday.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know if it's it's more. Well, it was like this. I was outside when I noticed I started to have some unhealthy thoughts. I went outside just to be in outside a bit, played with the dogs, and later I was like, "This is pretty zenish." I went to wash dishes. Like, yeah, I'm washing dishes. It's so,
Oh yeah.
and I was washing
Wax
dishes.
on, wax off.
Yeah, just I was washing dishes and just thinking about anything, just doing your this is maybe the camel part.
Mm.
uh, and
I don't know.
I was watching the dogs, and they were playing, and this it's one wants to play, the other doesn't want. The other one wants to play, and I was starting to feel like the one that doesn't get the play from the other one. I
Yeah.
started to feel bad for him. I started to feel sad, but like sincerely sad, like.
Mm.
And I was like, and then after I was sad, I saw that the dog is not sad, but he just waits for 2 seconds, and then they start to play. And I was
Yeah.
just going emotionally up and down. I mean, it was like a minute, but
Mhm.
and this was like first like on a psychological level, a revelation.
Mhm.
Like, oh, dude, you're like projecting you're
Oh
seeing
yeah.
yourself in the dog, and that's
Yeah.
like that was like a psychological level. But then
Mm.
I realized that's more like satori stuff. Then I see,
Mm.
whoa, but you're seeing yourself in everything. Like
Yeah.
you're projecting your emotional stuff on everything, like on
Mm. Mm.
everything. And it's
Yeah.
hard maybe to explain now, but it just started to
Mm. Yeah.
everything started to make sense. Like I start to like feed not feed energy, not feed everything with my own energy, just to see
Mm.
everything
Yeah.
separate from you. I don't know if
Yeah.
I realize I do it a lot. You project
Mm.
is
Mm. But everything also like projects on you. So the dog sees itself in relation to you, and everything is in relation to each other. So, I mean, you take like I think Alan Watts does an example. How do you define up, down, left, right? If you just had like one rock in space and that was it, just one rock, then there's nothing, there's no orientation. So we are always orienting ourselves and projecting onto each other in this mutual play of games, you could say. So the dog sees itself in relation to you, in relation to its environment, as we see ourselves in relation to ourselves, our environment, other people. um, so yeah, that's like this. There's this less distinction more and more between what is the self and what is the other or outside self, or and yeah, it's really interesting.
uh, one thing now that you mentioned is I wanted to say, so basically uh, when you speak about, we said we are going to try to define enlightenment and we are doing it now somehow, but in defining our how we understanding this point of
Yeah.
life. So I think also the major part why it's so hard to understand it, because you realize how many things are defined by language, and it's
Mm,
definitely we can say that it is something that is not describable, because it cannot be said
mm,
in words, because in the moment you use words, it's uh, it's it's it disappears. I don't know, for me it's somehow this just puddle of existence without form or words.
mm,
So it's not just words, it's form, like human being,
mm,
plant and stuff like that. The thing you said, but that's maybe the middle stage, because you said because you said like before Zen, mountains are just mountains, rivers are rivers, while exploring Zen, mountains are no longer mountains, rivers are no longer mountains, and after Zen, mountains are again mountains and rivers. So it's
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
you
That's
you
yeah.
you you you,
It's
you
a letting go. Yeah.
and you feel them like without giving them a name. They are still here. I think the part when you are losing the definitions, the languages, and
Mm,
this linguistic part it's when they lose their identity, but then you get back and it's kind of everything just, well, exists.
Yeah, everything exists. I think maybe it was Dogen, and I was reading in the book Zen and Nietzsche, or is it Nietzsche and Zen? I think it was Dogen or something actually took a skeptical stance to the idea that language could not capture enlightenment. And I think even that, pretty much anything could be a barrier or an ego foothold. So I could see how you could say, well, language can't describe it. But then you could also just say language can perfectly describe it, just so that you're not holding on to the idea that language can't describe it, because that itself is a foothold. So it's sort of the idea, and that's where this Zen parable is so great, because it gets to the idea that things are just things. And in some sense, when you have this space moment of like no ego, I guess, initially, after you get back to your skin, the ego, and the ego's like, whoa, what the hell just happened? Then it's putting these words together of saying, wow, dude, like, dude, the ego's false, man. Nothing is what it seems. Everything is much deeper. Like, we're all one, man. And yeah, in some sense, maybe, but that is like, that's the ego foothold. So it's the spiritual materialism. But that's the tricky thing is someone who is technically enlightened, whatever that means, could be saying the same things, could be doing the same things as someone who is technically not enlightened. So someone who has this state of awareness or whatever you want to call it could be saying, yeah, everything's one, oh, blah, blah, blah. And they have this awareness. But someone who doesn't have that awareness could be saying the exact same thing. So yeah, it's this weird state, but it also is weird in the sense that like there really is no difference between someone who's enlightened and not enlightened and someone who's awake and not awake. And it's really strange because but yeah, it gets to that like paradox level.
I mean, in a level of doing, it's not they're not different, but it's just a state of being. It's I guess a subjective state. Yeah, so maybe this is a good point to finish with some thoughts on how this idea can be used for our culture, maybe our some, because this is more like an individual's pursue for for enlightenment, but or for understanding, but then how can that be maybe used better in a, I don't know, you mentioned something about law enforcements and stuff like that. How can be maybe not just perfectly, but a little bit, how can that be used, I don't know, in our world?
Yeah. So like whether it's law enforcement or international politics or politicians or any government institution or business, by having this greater capacity. So not saying you have to like go really deep into this, like go all the way or whatever, become a monk, or whatever. But it's like getting this greater space between the ego and cultivating, I guess, this sense of greater space. Maybe is a good way of saying it. I like saying it that way. Is you're just able to better react and take advantage of energy when it's there and not beat yourself up when it's not there. So for example, like when I like today was pretty productive, like in terms of things, like there's this talk which is I think really productive, really meaningful and really good. And like early I did a bike ride and helping to like make some dirt bike paths on Iki Island to help rejuvenate the local economy here and like promote the island and get awareness out there. And that just kind of flowed. And another person who's like the head of this project kind of has a lot of energy, so it's sort of like letting his energy come to be my energy and just flowing with it. Because what can happen when people have ego blocks is, like, for example, let's say someone's really positive and they have this like super energy of like getting things done, and they're doing it, they're sailing the boat. And what can happen is if you have a lot of ego blocks, then skeptical thoughts arise, like, oh, is this person genuine, do they have an ulterior motive? And you get into this like little ego game, and instead of just jumping on the boat, just get on the boat, then there's this like, should I jump on the boat? Is it safe? How are the way? No, just jump on the boat. Just like, And it's like, so once the ego goes away or gets diminished, there's less resistance to accepting productive or non-productive energy when it's there or not there. And there's a greater space between negative or positive emotions. So let's say you're feeling angry, like I think ever since that driving experience a few months ago, like I'm always laughing. Like whenever I like anger arises at, like from slow Sunday drivers, slow drivers, I'm like I just kind of laugh. There's like a funny aspect to it because I know that there's like it's all a joke and the emotion is predicated on like this kind of illusion idea of an ego, and it's just there's this space. So for most people in any aspect of life, whether it's politics, police, or whatever, or jobs, personal life, relationships, there's this space where you can just be more freely and more openly, and you can totally accept your emotions, but there's also a joy, and you don't have to act those emotions out. You don't feel like you are those emotions. And so yeah, like if an angry emotion, let's say, normally would motivate you to like honk your horn or like just feel really angry and bitter, that could be redirected into humor. You know, that's why a lot of humor is really funny and a lot of comedy. Yeah, humor is really funny. But no, comedy is it can direct a lot of negative emotion
Yeah.
into such positive joy. You know,
Yeah.
people have the darkest scenes of like, oh man, that guy just got blown up, and everyone's like, ha, 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 you know, like laughing because you channel these dark forces, you could say negative forces, and you rechannel them into positive energy. And the same thing can happen with positive energy. People can take positive things and channel it through the ego into negative energy. I mean, whether that's a good or a bad thing, you know, whatever. I mean, typically people would probably want to be more positive and stuff. Um, but yeah, that's my
No,
take on it.
but it's good you mentioned it because actually that was kind of my process as well. Some of the stuff that I well, you get to a point where you're not able to admit to yourself that you are doing something wrong. I think it's
Mm,
hard to say no. It has to be the world. It's not me. But
mm.
then if you get this, like it's called like cosmic humor, it's
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that.
one
Yeah.
day I just reached to a point where I just started to laugh to my stuff because you get tired of how many times you repeat that shit after realizing it. And you just keep repeating and you just start to get angry on yourself. And then at one point I stopped
Yes.
being angry and I just
Mm.
I'm angry and I said and I start to laugh and it's so easy.
Yeah.
Like yeah,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Mm.
really easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it gets the whole game like
Mm.
playful and it's
Yeah. 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 No, no, it's definitely really fun. And it's like in one sense you could say like there's like in one version of it you could say it's like the escapism version where it's like using laughter and these channeling methods to avoid the emotions. So the very same process of like embracing joy in this greater spaciousness could be the very same methods, similar methods used to run away from emotions and run further into ego. And that's what the idea of spiritual materialism, the idea that anything spiritual, religious, or these sort of, you know, ways of expanding your perspective can be used to bolster the ego. uh, so in that sense, yeah, it's almost strange because it's almost like there's not really a way to describe it. It's just like there's the understanding that it's sort of all, you know, there's space and it's all kind of a game in some sense, or kind of made up or not real in some sense or another. And so there's a sort of joy and humor and creative spirit in that. But so maybe yeah, the understanding I guess is an important basis because yeah, I guess the similar, I guess, external behavior of laughing, you know, channeling anger and stuff into laughter. In some cases, it could be people running away from embracing the anger and just accepting it as being there and using laughter as just a diversion to run away from it. I think I actually did that in the past, which is
yeah
which is why it's funny because now I feel like my laughter is more natural and it's not a running away, it's a embracing. But
yeah.
yeah.
It's subtle differences. It's all not like big
Mm,
changes. Is everything stay? That's why I guess everything stays the
mm.
same, but it's
Yeah.
everything is just a bit different. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
turn the angle of looking at
Yeah.
things.
everything's exactly the same, but everything's completely different. No. At the same time.
Yeah. But it's with the thoughts and emotions. The good thing I use is like you are being the sky and your thoughts and emotions are being the clouds. So they are still there, but you don't
Oh yeah.
You're
That's
not
a cool,
you don't
cool idea.
identify with it. So it's
Yeah,
something
you're the
along the lines.
space. You're not the things happening in the space.
Yeah.
You're like the observational
The
force,
observer.
the conscious observer. Yeah.
So I think we did a fairly good job, and it's a good time to stop.
We got it. We solved it.
We solved enlightenment.
We solved enlightenment.
You're welcome.
Done.
Welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, the Moana. We're gonna get copyright strike.
Nice. But it's a good cartoon.
Yeah, that's good.
I will. Do you want to say something in Japanese, farewell or something?
Oh well, I could be like the really dramatic. You know, you like the samurai, right? So I could be like the samurai goodbye. You know, because I've watched some old samurai movies. It's like sarabada. You know, it's like usually the cliche goodbye is sayonara. You know, in Japanese, but people don't actually say that too much. They usually say like matane, like see you later, like ja, like well then, okay, like there's different things, but
it's like the Rastafari.
Yeah, man. Yeah. The reggae is actually pretty good on Iki Island. They have reggae interest in Iki and like the Kyushu area. It's pretty cool.
They have dreadlocks as well.
Everyone I don't know doesn't have dreadlocks. They just like the music, and some people make it. So maybe they're not into the Rasta, the more just the reggae music, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Neo Rasta, maybe. Yeah. Neo reggae. The new.
I will stop recording.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it was good. It was good talking with you, Marco. And if you want to talk again, or if other people want to talk on Zen and everything in between, feel free to reach out to either of us. I think in the description of either of our videos or podcasts, you'll find Marco and my channel. And like, subscribe, or whatever you do or not do.
Yeah, we're connecting America, Japan, and Croatia, so we have to use this internet.
International connection. Here we go. Okay. Anyways, hope everyone's having a good day, good week, and see ya. Yeah.
Bye.
Goodbye.